The night my husband told me I was useless, I had just buried my father 4 weeks earlier. I had held my son's hands at the graveside. I had signed the paperwork. I had thanked the relatives and packed away his things and kept myself together through all of it. And then, in our own kitchen, with the dinner plates still on the table, the man I had spent 11 years building a life with looked at me and said those 4 words like he had been waiting a long time to say them. "You are useless, Diane." He told me to leave. He told me to take our sons and go live in the broken motel my father had just left me in the will. He thought he was throwing me away. He had no idea he was handing me everything. My name is Diane Mercer. I am 37 years old. I have 2 sons, Carter, who is 9, and Miles, who is 7. My father, Raymond Mercer, passed away on a cold Tuesday morning in November after 18 months of fighting an illness that slowly took everything from him except his mind. His mind stayed sharp until the very end. I understand why that mattered now more than I did then. 3 weeks after we buried him, the family gathered at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. The room was beige and very quiet, the kind of room designed to make difficult conversations feel formal. My sister Vivian arrived first. She wore a blazer. Her husband, Brett, pulled her chair out before sitting down himself, already carrying the posture of a man who expected to collect something. My husband, Nathan, sat beside me. He straightened his watch twice. He did not look at me once. The lawyer opened the folder and cleared his throat. The contents of Raymond Mercer's estate are as follows. The Lakeview apartment portfolio, comprising 4 residential buildings in the downtown district, is to be transferred in full to Vivian Mercer Aldridge. Vivian exhaled slowly. Brett placed his hand over hers. Something in the room shifted toward them like weight finding its center. The lawyer continued without pausing. The Ridgeline Highway Motel, located on Route 9 outside the city, is to be transferred in full to Diane Mercer. Silence. Not the respectful kind. The kind that fills a room when people are working very hard not to say what they are actually thinking. Someone cleared their throat. My aunt studied the floor. Vivian pressed her lips together, but her eyes were already smiling. Nathan went completely still, and that was worse than anything he could have said out loud. On the drive home, he was quiet for 38 of the 40 minutes. Then he used the last 2 to make up for it. Your father left Vivian 4 apartment buildings, income-generating properties, real money, and he left you a motel on a highway that hasn't had guests in how long? It's still property, I said quietly. He turned toward the window. Your sister is going to be wealthy, he said, and you are going to be a joke. I told myself that was the worst of it. I was wrong. That evening, Vivian and Brett came to the house for dinner. My mother was there, my aunt and her husband. The table was full and loud the way it gets after a loss, full of food and noise and the performance of togetherness. But beneath all of it ran a current I could feel without being able to name, something competitive and quiet. Halfway through the meal, Nathan raised his glass toward my sister. To Vivian, he said, for inheriting real assets. Brett laughed. Vivian brought her hand to her mouth like she was embarrassed. She wasn't. My mother smiled the way she does when she doesn't know what else to do. My aunt looked at her plate. I smiled too, a small, careful smile. The kind you wear when you are protecting something inside yourself that you cannot let anyone else touch. After everyone left, the house felt hollow. I was clearing the dishes when Nathan walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. Your father had a favorite, he said, and it wasn't you. My hands went still in the water. You spent years driving back and forth to that hospital, he continued. You arranged everything. You sat with him for hours, and in the end he left you a broken motel on a highway nobody uses. He paused. Then he said it. You are useless, Diane. 4 words, clean and simple, like he had been carrying them for a long time and was relieved to finally set them down. I turned off the faucet. I dried my hands slowly. I did not cry. I want you to leave, he said. Take the boys. Go. If that motel is all you have, go live in it. I looked at him for a long moment. I was waiting for him to blink. He didn't. Fine, I said. I walked upstairs and packed 2 bags for my sons and 1 for myself. Carter was awake when I came into his room. He sat up and looked at the bag. He is 9, old enough to know when something is wrong, young enough that I could still protect him from knowing exactly what. "We're going on a trip," I told him. "Tonight. Just for a little while." The drive to the motel took 43 minutes. Miles fell asleep before we reached the highway. Carter watched the dark trees passing outside the window and said nothing. He is like me in that way. He watches. He waits. The Ridgeline Highway Motel appeared on the right side of Route 9, like something the road had simply forgotten to remove. The sign was the old kind with individual illuminated letters. Several had burned out. What remained spelled something that wasn't a word anymore. I pulled into the empty parking lot and sat for a moment with the engine running. This was mine now. I carried Miles inside first, then came back for Carter. I found a room near the front office that looked less damaged than the others. I wiped the beds down with cloths I had packed out of habit. I spread our jackets on top of the sheets for warmth. The boys were asleep within minutes. I sat in the chair by the window and listened to the highway. Trucks passing in the dark, headlights sweeping across the ceiling, the old buildings settling around me the way structures do when the temperature drops. I was 37 years old. I had a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, no income, and a motel nobody wanted. I sat there for a long time. Around midnight, something made me get up. Some instinct I couldn't name. I needed to move. I needed to look. I needed to understand why my father had brought me here when he could have left me anywhere. I walked to the front office. The overhead light flickered twice before it held. My father's old desk chair was still there. The guest register was open on the counter to a page from 4 years ago. A clock on the wall had stopped at 3:14. Old coffee mugs on a shelf. A faded calendar 3 years out of date. Dust on everything, the kind that settles so slowly over so long that it becomes part of the surface. I sat in his chair. The armrest on the right side was worn down where he always rested his elbow when he read. I ran my thumb across it. I opened the desk drawers. Pens, rubber bands. A broken stapler, old receipts. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe I was just looking for him. For some trace of the man who had spent so many hours sitting in this chair, in this office, in this building that everyone else had written off as worthless. Then I noticed the cabinet. It was built low into the wall behind the front desk. Made of wood, not particularly large, but something about it was wrong. It was different from everything else in the room. Not newer exactly, but cleaner. Less dusty, like someone had handled it recently. I walked closer. There was a small lock on the cabinet door, and beneath the lock on the frame, a small brass nail had been hammered into the wood. Hanging on that nail was a key. I stood there looking at it. My father did not do things carelessly. If the key was in plain sight, it was because he wanted it found. He wanted it found by someone specific, and he had left this place to me. I reached for the key. My hand was shaking, not from fear, from something much closer to grief. Because standing there in the dark in his old office, I understood for the first time that he had been planning something. He had done it quietly, without telling anyone, and now he was gone, and whatever he had built was locked inside this cabinet, waiting for whoever came through the door. He had known it would be me. I put the key in the lock. It turned without resistance, too easily, like it had been used not very long ago. I opened the cabinet door. Inside were 3 things. A stack of sealed manila envelopes, each labeled with a date. A rolled paper map held with a rubber band. And a small metal tin, the kind used for tea or biscuits, sitting closed at the back. I took the map out first. I unrolled it on the desk. It was a land survey, printed on heavy paper and precise in every detail. The motel property was outlined in red ink. I could see the shape of the lot, the road along the front, the long stretch of flat land behind the building that I had walked past without thinking when I arrived. But there was something else on the map, a thick blue line running diagonally across the rear portion of the property. I leaned close to read the small printed text beside it. Proposed Route 9 Commercial Extension, Phase 3. I stared at it. I opened the first envelope. Inside were letters from the city planning department, dated across the past 2 years. I read slowly, standing at the desk, the motel quiet around me. The language was careful and bureaucratic, but the meaning was not complicated. A highway extension project had been in development for several years. Phases 1 and 2 were already complete. Phase 3, the final expansion, was awaiting its last round of approvals. The extension would create a new commercial exit on Route 9, approximately 1.2 miles from the current interchange. The Ridgeline Motel sat at the 1.2-mile mark. I opened the second envelope. Letters from private companies, real estate developers, infrastructure firms. The language was formal, but I recognized it immediately. We are writing to express significant interest in acquiring the above-referenced property. We believe this location represents exceptional long-term commercial value. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss terms at your earliest convenience. My father had been receiving these letters, multiple letters, from multiple companies, across 2 years. I opened a third envelope. Inside was a formal acquisition offer from a company called Meridian Land Partners. It was dated 4 months ago, while my father was still alive. The number at the bottom of the offer page made me sit down. It was not a small number. It was not a cautious opening bid. It was a number that rearranged everything I thought I understood about this motel, about my father, about the night my husband had looked me in the eyes and called me useless. At the bottom of the page, in my father's careful handwriting, offer respectfully declined. Property not currently for sale. He had turned that money down. And then he had left the land to me. I kept reading. The most recent letter in the stack was dated 6 weeks before he died. The highway extension had received preliminary approval from the county board. Construction on Phase 3 was expected to begin within the year. The motel's location, once the new exit opened, would sit at the junction of 2 major commercial corridors. Zoning reclassification to commercial mixed use had already been formally proposed. The empty land behind the motel, that flat open stretch I had walked past in the dark just hours ago, would become the most accessible parcel on the new exit once the road came through. My father had known this for 2 years. He had sat in this chair in this quiet office while the world rushed past on the highway outside, and he had read those letters, and he had declined those offers, and he had waited. And then he had left it to me. I reached for the metal tin at the back of the cabinet. It opened without a lock. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. The handwriting was my father's, slanted and slightly uneven the way it had become since his hands began to trouble him in his last year. I unfolded it carefully. The way you handle something you already know will change the rest of your life. Diane, it read. If you are reading this, I am gone. And I am glad you found this because it means you came here. It means you stayed. I know how the will looks. I know what people will say. Let them say it. Let them think I favored Vivian. Let them think you were forgotten. I need you to trust me a little longer. The land behind this motel is worth more than everything your sister received. But only if you wait. Only if you hold on. The highway extension will be approved. The developers will come back. When they do not rush. Do not accept the first offer. Find a good property attorney before you speak to anyone. I did not give you this motel because it was all I had left to give. I gave it to you because you are the only one of my children who reads before she acts, who waits before she speaks. This required patience. That has always been you. The apartment buildings will earn rent. This land will earn a future. I love you, I always have. I didn't always say it enough. Dad. I sat in his chair for a long time after I finished reading. The highway outside carried its trucks and its late travelers, and the motel was quiet around me, and I held my father's letter and let myself cry for the first time since I had buried him. Not entirely from sadness. From something that felt like being seen, like being understood by someone after a very long time of feeling invisible. The next morning, I called the city planning office from the parking lot while my boys ate breakfast inside. The woman who answered was patient and efficient. I gave her the address. She typed for a moment. Yes, she said. The Route 9 commercial extension is confirmed. Phase 3 construction begins this spring. Zoning reclassification notices are being issued to affected property owners within the next 60 days. Has this address received one yet? I asked. She checked. A certified notice was sent approximately 3 weeks ago, she said. My father had died 4 weeks ago. The notice would be sitting unopened in the house mail, in a pile Nathan had not touched. He had no idea it existed. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the number from the Meridian letter. It rang twice. This is Meridian Land Partners. Jonathan speaking. My name is Diane Mercer. I'm calling about the Ridgeline Highway Motel on Route 9. My father was the previous owner. He passed away last month. I'm the current owner. A brief pause. I'm very sorry for your loss. He didn't waste time on condolences. I appreciated that. We remain very interested in that property, he said. Would you be open to meeting? Yes, I said. I'll be bringing my attorney. There was something that might have been a small smile in his voice. Of course, he said. That would be entirely appropriate. I spent the next several days moving carefully. I hired a property attorney named Sandra Holt, a woman whose business card I had kept in my wallet for years without knowing exactly why. I sent her the cabinet documents and gave her the full background. She called the following morning. Diane, she said, her voice measured and precise, I want you to understand what you have here. The land at that location is going to be the anchor point of a major new commercial corridor. The original offer from Meridian was an opening position, not a ceiling, and that was before construction was officially approved. How far above it can we go? I asked. Significantly, she said, and before you decide anything, I want you to consider something else. She paused. Your father turned down that offer even when it was very good money. He also didn't leave you any instructions about selling. Have you considered that there might be more than one way to use this land? I thought about my father, about the years he had sat in that office, holding on quietly. Tell me more, I said. A ground lease, she explained. You keep the land. A developer builds and operates on it. You receive annual income for the life of the lease. Your sons inherit the land when you're gone. You never stop owning it. I was quiet for a long moment. That's what he was thinking, I said. Know me. Sandra let that sit. Let me draw up the comparison, she said. You'll want to see the numbers before Thursday. That Thursday morning, Jonathan arrived with 2 associates. They were professional and polite and unable to fully conceal how interested they were. They walked the rear property with measuring equipment. They documented the access points and the boundary markers. They photographed everything with the focused attention of people who already knew what they were looking at. When we sat down in the office, Jonathan folded his hands on the desk. Ms. Mercer, he said, I want to be direct. Once that exit opens, this location becomes the most commercially accessible parcel in this county. We are prepared to make a revised offer today. He placed a folder on the desk. Sandra reached for it before I did. She reviewed the top page, and her expression did not change. She turned the folder toward me and slid it across. I looked at the number. It was not the same as the original offer. It was substantially higher. It was a number that would clear every debt I had, secure both of my boys from school through university, and leave a significant amount remaining. It was a number that would have made Nathan go completely still. I closed the folder. I need 48 hours, I said. Of course, Jonathan replied. When they left, Sandra and I sat in the office together. You don't have to sell, she said simply. The lease structure I outlined would generate income every year for the next 25 years with renewal options. You retain ownership. Your sons inherit. I looked around the office, at my father's chair, at the stopped clock on the wall, at the cabinet behind the desk where everything had been waiting. Draft the lease structure, I said. Let's see what he actually built here. That Sunday night, I sent a message to Nathan and Vivian both. Family dinner. Same restaurant we always used. My treat. Vivian arrived looking confident. She had closed a refinancing deal on one of her buildings that week, and she wore the satisfaction of it the way some people wear jewelry, not loudly, but visibly. Nathan arrived after her. He was wearing the jacket he always chose when he wanted to appear relaxed but wasn't. He stood briefly when I came to the table, which he rarely did. We ordered. The conversation stayed on surface things. Then Vivian asked, with a smile she wasn't fully hiding, how things were at the motel. Quiet, I said. Nathan leaned back slightly. Have you figured out what you're going to do with it? I reached into the folder. I had brought and placed Sandra's one-page summary on the table between them. I figured out quite a bit, I said. Vivian reached for it first. She read the top line, then the second, then she looked up at me. Nathan took it from her. He read it through once, then he read it again. The restaurant noise continued around us. The waiter passed by. Nathan set the page down on the table very carefully, the way you set down something fragile. This is the motel, he said. Route 9. Yes. Your father knew about all of this. He planned it for years, I said. He turned down multiple offers so the land would still be in the family when the project was approved. Nathan looked at me across the table, not with anger, not with the contempt I had learned to read in his silences, with something I had never seen in 11 years, something that looked like genuine reckoning. Diane, he said quietly, I said something terrible that night, I know that. Yes, I said, you did. If I could take it back. I looked at him, at the table, at Vivian, who had gone very still. I believe you mean that, I said, but what you said that night wasn't new. It was the first time you said it out loud. I have felt useless in this marriage for longer than one evening. That didn't start the night of the will reading. He looked down. I've already spoken with a family law attorney, I said, not to punish you, because we stopped being the same people who started this a long time ago, and I think both of us have known it. He didn't argue. That told me something important. The divorce took 4 months. It was handled through attorneys with no courtroom. Nathan did not contest the motel or the development arrangement. Sandra made certain the asset structure was untouchable before we ever sat down to negotiate, and his attorney saw the position clearly. I signed the ground lease agreement with Meridian Land Partners on a Tuesday morning in February. Jonathan shook my hand across my father's old desk. Your father was a wise man, he said. He was, I said. 2 weeks later, I signed the divorce papers. The boys and I moved into a house 20 minutes from their school. It was the first home I had chosen entirely on my own terms. Carter helped me pick the color for the kitchen. Miles wanted a tree in the yard. I found both. In March, I drove out to the motel, one last time before the construction crew arrived. The sign was already down. Survey flags marked the parking lot perimeter. Earth-moving equipment waited along the far edge. The last row of rooms was quiet, doors closed, windows dusty. I walked to the back of the property. The land stretched out behind the old building exactly as it always had. Flat and open and unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what was coming. But if you knew where to look, you could already see where the road would enter. You could see where the main access point would be. You could see how everything was about to change. I stood there for a while. I thought about my father sitting in that office across all those years, watching the traffic on Route 9, reading the letters, declining the offers, holding on with the patience of a man who understood that timing is its own kind of wealth. He had loved Vivian, I never doubted that. But he had understood me. And in the end, understanding is its own inheritance, the kind you cannot divide between two people, the kind that only works if it reaches exactly the right person. I took the brass key from my jacket pocket, the same one I had lifted off that small nail in the dark, the first night, alone, with my sons asleep in the next room and my whole world reduced to a dusty office and a locked cabinet. I held it in my hand. Then I set it down on the back step of the last room and walked away. Vivian called me that spring. Her voice was different, still confident, but the confidence had been tested somewhere and hadn't come back quite the same. The investor group on her refinancing had restructured, she said. One of the buildings had significant repair costs that weren't in the original assessment. That's hard, I said. I meant it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the motel deal. Mom told me some of it. It worked out, I said. Dad knew, didn't he? About the highway. Yes. Another pause. Why didn't he tell you before he died? Why did he leave it hidden? I thought about that. About the cabinet. About the key on the nail. About reading that letter alone in the middle of the night with everything stripped away. Because it only works if the person holding it has the patience to wait, I said. If I had known from the beginning, I might have rushed. I might have taken the first offer. I might have told the wrong people too soon. He needed me to find it on my own, when I had nothing else. That's when you find out whether someone can hold something valuable without dropping it. Vivian was quiet for a long time. He always knew you better than either of us realized, she said finally. He did, I said. We talked a little longer. The conversation was different from how our conversations had been for years. Quieter, more honest. Something between us that had been clenched for a long time was beginning to come loose. I don't know exactly what we will be to each other going forward. I have stopped making confident predictions about the future. I have learned that the future tends to surprise you, especially in the moments when you are most certain you have lost everything. Those are usually exactly the moments when you find out what you actually have. Carter turned 10 that summer. I took him and Miles out to the property site. The foundation was already poured. Steel frames were going up. The new road curved in a clean arc from the highway toward what would become the entrance of the commercial center. Carter looked at it for a long time with his serious face. Did Grandpa own all this? He asked. The land, I said. He owned the land underneath it. And now you do. I looked at my son, at his patient eyes and the way he holds things quietly before he speaks. Now we do, I said. He nodded like this was exactly what he expected to hear, and went back to watching the cranes. There will be people in your life who look at what you have been given and call it nothing. They will measure your inheritance against someone else's and decide yours is lesser. They will read your patience as weakness and your silence as emptiness. They will say the word useless like it settles something. Let them. Because the people who are quickest to assign you a value are almost always wrong about what you're worth. And the things that look broken from the outside are sometimes just waiting. My father knew that. He spent years sitting quietly in a faded office on a highway people drove past without stopping, holding something the world didn't know to look for, waiting for the right moment to pass it on. He didn't leave me a motel. He left me a future. And the night my husband opened the door and told me to walk through it, he thought he was ending something. He had no idea he was beginning it. If this story stayed with you, if you know what it feels like to be handed something the world called worthless, and take the time to understand why it wasn't, then you already know this story belongs to more than one person. This channel is for everyone who has ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better. If that is you, hit the like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a story. Ring that notification bell. The next one is already coming. I will see you there. We're not monetized yet. Every story is made purely for you. If you'd like to support our work and help us grow, check the link in the description. Thank you.